Good morning and welcome to the Maryland Public Service Commission's administrative meeting for March 24th, 2021. We'll begin today with approval of the minutes from our last meeting on March 17th, 2021. The vote begins with Commissioner Herman.
I'll abstain.
Commissioner O'Donnell. Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved. Good morning, Mr. Secretary.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. There are 6 items on today's consent agenda. Item number 1 is from PEG Bandwidth Maryland LLC and Everstream Solutions LLC, noticing a transfer of customers from PEG Bandwidth to Everstream. Item number 2 is a notice from PEG Bandwidth Maryland LLC and Unity National LLC of participation in financing agreements. Item number 3 is a notification from Level Communications LLC of participation in a financing agreement. Item number 4 is a notice, a notice of cancellation of bond for IceTech Energy Services, Inc. from Philadelphia Insurance Companies. Items number 5 and 6 are notices from Platte River Insurance Company for Eversource LLC of cancellations of bonds for the company's electricity supplier and gas supplier licenses.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have questions on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I move that with respect to item number 1, that we note the transfer to Everstream Solutions LLC of certain customer contracts and the associated telecommunications assets of PEG Bandwidth Maryland LLC. With respect to item number 2, that we note the company's participation in certain modified revolving credit facilities. With respect to item number 3, that we note the company's participation in the financing arrangement of its parent company, Level 3 Financing Incorporated. And with respect to items number 4, 5, and 6, that we cancel the respective company's electricity supplier license. The vote begins with Commissioner Herman.
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell. And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I did vote aye, Mr. Chairman. I couldn't get unmuted. Thank you.
Thank you. I vote aye. The motion is approved.
Mr. Chairman, item number 7 today, the only item on the administrative agenda, is an application from Clark Construction Group LLC for approval to construct a generation station. On this item for staff, we have Michael Zhang and James Greger. Also here should be Dr. Henry Cole, and I believe that's all the participants for today.
Thank you. We'll begin with staff. Good morning, Mr. Zhang.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Michael Zhang on behalf of staff. Item number 7 is an application by Clark Construction Group LLC for a CPCN exemption that was originally filed confidentially. The company later indicated to staff that some of the information could be shared as long as it was for official use only. The company plans to construct 3 2.25 megawatt generators at Joint Base Andrews, Maryland. The company indicated that the generators will be only used during an emergency and will not be synchronized with the Joint Base Andrews electric distribution system. The company provided notice to the governing bodies of Prince George's County where the generators will be installed. Staff has reviewed the application and believes that the application has met the requirements of the CPCN exemption. The company is reminded that it must obtain all required local permits and authorizations and comply with the applicable zoning ordinances, land use requirements, and environmental regulations. Staff recommends that the Commission grant the applicant an exemption from the CPCN requirement and approve construction of the generation station. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zhang. It's my understanding that we don't have a representative from the applicant present today. Is that your understanding?
Yes, that's my understanding as well.
Thank you. I know Dr. Henry Cole, representing Clean Air Prince George's, filed a number of pleadings in this docket. Dr. Cole, good morning.
Good morning. Can you hear me? You can hear me, right? Okay, so first let me thank you for the opportunity to testify in this case. I want you to know from the outset that we are not opposed to this installation. We feel that it's vital that the Air Force Base has access to emergency power. It's a matter of national security. We also know that our commander-in-chief uses that Air Force Base, so we want to make sure that it's up and running whenever it needs to be. Having said that, as you know, Clean Air Prince George's has been concerned about air quality issues particularly in the greater Brandywine area. Right now, there are 4 existing fossil fuel power plants within 13 miles of greater Brandywine. I find that I don't know where the location is exactly on the base, but the base is about 8 miles from Brandywine. So, so we have concerns. We'd like to make sure of a number of things. We would ask that the Public Service Commission, in its approval, explicitly define the term emergency. That would be important. And 2, ask the operators to provide some estimate of the number of hours or days per year that such emergencies may occur. Now, the way they can get that is to look at historical records. And of course, that's going to be imprecise and estimate, but it would still be useful for the regulators, particularly the MDE, to have that information when it evaluates, excuse me, the application for an air permit. And we do, correct me if I'm wrong, please, but we did note in the staff recommendations that a air pollution permit from the Maryland Department of the Environment will be needed for this application. We do ask that the commission specifically state that in its decision. We also believe that we also believe that the MDE, in reviewing this application for a permit, should make all those application materials available to the public. We would ask the commission to make sure that the MDE conducts an EPA consistent modeling exercise to determine or estimate the concentrations and make sure that they comply with the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. Finally, we would urge the MDE and the plant's operators through the Public Service Commission to use all feasible measures to reduce emissions. Such measures can minimize pollutant exposures to the public and the many thousands of military and civilian personnel employees that work at the base as well. So as I said, in summary, we're not opposed. We want to make sure that the MD does a good job in reviewing the permit. We think the commission should explicitly require the MDE and the applicant to submit its application to the MDE for an air permit, and that the public have an opportunity to review the application and with ample time to give comments and feedback to the MDE. With that, I'm here to take any questions that you might have, and thank you. And thank the staff for its help in getting me to log on. I seem to make frequent mistakes in trying to file stuff, but people like Gregor Smith and Mr. Johnston have been very, very helpful. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Dr. Cole. Our staff always does strive to assist those who practice and come before the Public Service Commission. So you just raised a number of concerns, and it's unfortunate that the applicant is not with us today. However, these types of CPCN waiver applications are not intended to be mini CPCN reviews of some of the larger projects that I know that you're familiar with. Of course, the applicant would need to comply with all environmental regulations, including the necessary air permits. But that's another state agency, and they have to comply with the necessary laws and regulations regarding these facilities and to obtain whatever permits are necessary. So why, I guess, are you asking the Service Commission to intervene or get involved? I think that was what your request was, and please correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, well, that's certainly a good question. The Public Service Commission is in fact an agency that is required, as given the duties to protect the public's well-being. It's to serve the public, and we believe that part of that job is to make sure that the agencies that are involved in such decisions as you make follow up in a very careful manner, and specifically one that where the issues are environmental health. We think it's critical that the Public Service Commission weighed in. We would also hope, for example, that the Public Service Commission would begin to play a very active role in reducing carbon emissions and addressing climate change and environmental justice, which is certainly an issue in the Brandywine area. So we think that you can play an important role in your instructions or your approval with language that would move the regulatory agencies such as MDE or DNR in that direction. And that is our hope. We've worked with you on previous issues such as the Mattawoman Power Plant. And I think you know what our chief concerns are. And we ask that you become partners in pushing and being advocates for the public health. And that, explains my wanting to talk this morning. As I said, I have no objection. We think this is a vital thing. We'd like to see emergency defined and all care taken here. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Well,
you may not agree, but that's my position.
obviously, this commission is bound by state law, and that state law is the Public Utilities Article. There are other state agencies that have their respective statutes, which they're responsible for. Air quality concerns, while important, we are not the agency that is charged with issuing air quality permits. That is MDE. And if and when we grant this CPCN waiver request, as the staff just stated, the holder of that request would need to comply with all applicable laws of other state agencies, including MDE and DNR. So I would hope that would be sufficient to address your concerns without more. Perhaps not, but let me ask my colleagues if they have questions. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Richard, sorry.
I'll yield to Commissioner Richard.
Oh, I was just going to simply say I appreciate Dr. Cole participating in this morning's hearing, and I think his comments are very right on point. And I would agree with the chairman. We have a limited role this morning in this waiver request, but for me anyway, explicit in the recommendation from staff that we are taking up this morning, the company is reminded that it must obtain all required local permits, authorizations, and comply with all applicable zoning ordinances, land use requirements, and environmental regulations. So I hope that's a strong message within our abilities, within our authority to ensure the company knows that we're watching and that we expect that they comply with all the laws that the chairman just noted. So again, appreciate your participation this morning, Dr. Cole.
Thank you. I had a question for any of the commissioners, which is there any specific language that prohibits the commission from giving these other agencies a nudge in the right direction?
Dr. Cole, with all due respect, we have to be very careful with interagency overlap and direction. There's a high sensitivity to that. We have no authority, executive authority over any other agency in the state. So we have to be careful with a gentle nudge because it's not often appreciated, although sometimes does occur, acknowledged. We have to be very careful. We don't oversee other agencies, nor do they oversee us.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. I think the commission has made great strides in allowing effective public participation, and we appreciate that. So unless there are further questions, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Cole. Mr. Chairman, I do have a question, and it's not for Mr. Cole. It's a question probably for staff counsel, Mr. Greger. If anybody listened to the rulemaking on Monday, you heard me probing into Title VI environmental justice arena, and I just want to make sure that we're staying on the straight and narrow with regard to our requirements. If we grant a CPCN, we bypass all of the notification requirements that we have agreed to under Title VI. And it's a sensitive area. It's a sensitive area of the state. It's a sensitive area of law. And we need to make sure that we're on the straight and narrow in terms of not bypassing the requirements we have agreed to under environmental justice kind of strictures. So can you comment on how we're looking at those, how we're looking at CPCNs that are waivers and making sure that we're on the straight and narrow?
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm not familiar with your comments that occurred in the rulemaking on Monday, but in regards to this specific process, the CPCN exemption process, as far as notification, there have been several instances over the past 2 years where we've had to refocus our efforts on ensuring that the representatives of any given jurisdiction or municipality are informed that these projects are going on. So as the chairman alluded to earlier, the CPCN exemption process is not a mini CPCN process, but it is a truncated version of approval to get these standby generators or emergency generators set up that are under a certain threshold. So as far as public notification in this particular process, we focused on ensuring that the proper authorities are notified that these projects are going on and giving those authorities the proper amount of time to comment on those or to get public feedback.
Yeah, that's not scratching my itch on this question. I know that we're doing this. I'm confident that we're doing the CPCN exemption notifications correctly. So the processes of notification under the exemption process, I'm very highly confident that that's being done properly. What I'm not so sure about is whether or not we're exposing ourselves to a potential argument that we're bypassing the requirements that we've agreed to in a memorandum of understanding with the federal government to adhere to certain processes under the CPCN process. We're trying to avoid those by granting exemptions. I want to make sure that somebody's looking at that and that we don't have that exposure. That's why I'm starting these discussions, so that someone thinks that maybe that's important to look at.
Yes, Commissioner. I mean,
Okay.
that is something we can look into in regards to how the CPCN exemptions or CPCN waivers play into the environmental justice notification process from that executive order or from the federal regulatory perspective.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You may want to speak to Ms. Garofalo, who had to listen to some of my questioning along these lines on Mondays.
So if I could comment,
Yes, Commissioner.
if I could comment on this. I am a board member of Patuxent Riverkeeper, which is party to that environmental justice suit along with some other organizations. And I think it's important to state, and maybe one thing you can do is in your notification to the MDE or to the applicant, or advice to agencies who have to issue permit, that they pay careful attention. This is the word environmental justice does have the word environment, which highlights some of the concerns that I raised previously. So I think that the Public Service Commission could play a role here along the lines of that were just stated by Mr. O'Donnell. And I think there are ways that you could play an important role in in advising the regulatory agencies along this line and ensure that the public does have an opportunity to participate in such decisions.
Thank you, Dr. Cole. I appreciate your commentary, supplementing my questions. They were really intended to be introspective for the agency itself, so that we could start looking internally to make sure that that we're analyzing these issues appropriately. But thank you for your comments. Appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I'm always available to give advice. So,
Thank you.
thank you
Commissioner
very much.
Lincoln, your microphone's open.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. I had a question similar to Commissioner O'Donnell's question, specifically for our staff. Appendix A had a listing of a number of elected officials who were notified of the CPCN waiver request. But I noted that that appendix was put together in November, and several of those individuals listed on there are no longer in the position they were in at the time of the notice being developed. So I know that the applicant's not here today, but I was just curious if we knew if it had been supplemented, if there had been an additional attempt to reach out to those new representatives since the original request.
Commissioner, not to my knowledge, we haven't received anything from any public officials in regards to comments or as far as this project is concerned, but we can follow up with the company to see if a supplemental notification list has been sent out.
Okay, I think that's fine. All right, and I appreciate the follow-up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I had.
Thank you, Commissioner Linton. Seeing no additional questions from commissioners, at this point, I'm prepared to make a motion that we grant the applicant Clark Construction Group LLC an exemption from the requirement to obtain a certificate of public convenience and necessity and approve the construction of the generation stations. The vote begins with Commissioner Herman,
Aye.
Commissioner Lincoln,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Aye.
and Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motion is approved. Just a programming note, the commission will reconvene at 10:35 a.m. in approximately 10 minutes for case number 9619. With that, today's administrative meeting is now adjourned.